So I wanted to sort of apply to 5 to 6 M7 schools, but I had some concerns still. I still had somewhere between 3 to 3.5 years of work experience, which second concern was obviously round two is harder than round one. But yeah, it would mean delaying my MBA by a year. So I think I reached out to you with the plan of applying to 2 schools in round two for 2026 intake. I was okay with that risk. So that's when I came across the MCB website and I went through some of your blogs. It gave me a lot of clarity in terms of what I might need to do. I think you gave me a lot of in-depth insights on things that I can work on all fronts of my profile, right? Whose first was Columbia, second was Wharton. Columbia came out, it was a waitlist for me, which was slightly disappointed. And then a week later, thankfully, Wharton came back with an admit. I think you'll be able to build a coherent story if you truly believe in what you are setting out to achieve.
What does it take to get into an elite business school? MBA Crystal Ball is a boutique admissions consulting firm. Each year, we help a select few applicants get into the world's best business schools. Here's one of our success stories to inspire and educate.
Hello and welcome to MBA Crystal Ball's YouTube channel. Today we have with us Atharva, who's going to one of the big three schools, as we call it, the Wharton Business School, with some really interesting elements to his journey. Let's hear how he did it. Welcome, Atharva.
Thank you, Manish. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for sharing your journey. Atharva, can you, to begin with, can you share a little about yourself, your qualifications?
Sure. So yeah, I'm born and brought up in Mumbai. I mostly did all of my schooling here. I pursued engineering from IIT Kharagpur, did chemical engineering and financial engineering both. It was a dual degree course. Other than that, I've also sort of pursued the CFA charter and worked in investment banking and venture capital till now. About me, other than work, I think I've been a sports person since childhood. I've love to sort of play football all across my life till now. I also love playing other sports like paddle, cricket, and all. Some of my other interests are also I play the guitar a bit. I love watching mystery genre movies and just reading about finance and startup content. Yeah.
Right. Now, after IIT, you kind of pivoted into the world of finance. How did you make that decision? How did you make it happen?
Right. So finance, actually, I think my dad was like a CFO at an NBFC, and my mom also worked in a bank. So finance sort of conversations were very naturally occurring at my house. And I built interest early on, but also wanted to pursue engineering to develop a more structured way of thinking. And then got into financial engineering, had a few courses there in college, which started interesting me a lot. Led me to pursue internships at KPMG and then at Deutsche Bank, which then ended up converting to a full-time offer. At Deutsche Bank, my role was that of a credit analyst. I sort of supported credit trading desks in developed markets. And what I really loved about the role is how we were the first line of defense for the bank. And I sort of saw the bigger picture on how a huge investment bank sort of handles and hedges the credit risk that they have across a lot of counterparties that they deal with. The role was also very qualitative and quantitative in nature. So it involved, assessing financials as well as building tools. So it was financial as well as technical, and I love working at the confluence of those two things. That was pretty much about my role there.
After DB, you managed another very interesting transition into the world of VC. Tell us, how did you manage to do that?
Right. So post DB, I also realized that I want to now transition to a place where I wanted more decision-making skills, which I developed. And I thought VC was a very natural progression that way. In terms of how I managed the transition, I think it was a long process. It wasn't easy, I would say. There were a lot of interviews that I had to give where I started learning how the process really works. VCs are super lean teams. The hiring process is very unstructured. But after a few interviews, I started realizing there is a method to the madness, right? And I realized that there are 3 things that are super important that you need to have if you want to get into VC. So one is you need to have very differentiated opinions. Two is you need to build a very good network of people and who are in the industry and you can get insights from. And three is you need to develop very good first principles thinking. So I sort of worked in those directions, built depth and opinions across sort of sectors that interested me, which were, for me, it was fintech and climate tech, but of course different for different people. Talked to a lot of seniors in VC who helped me gain more perspective and build network, right? Which helped me actually drive the interview in a certain direction, which I wanted it to go in. Not all interview processes are the same, but some also ask you to do some financial modeling and case studies where my CFA degree helped, where I could make discounted cash flow models, etc. And through the whole process, then eventually I converted with a fund called Momentum Capital, where I work now, and that's in climate tech. So I really enjoy the work there. Yeah.
Right. Very, very interesting. Now, apart from that extreme networking, obviously, that it requires, any resources that you referred to that really were useful in this journey of this transition?
Right. So I think there are quite a few good resources out there for people who want to really understand. I think the first thing that you need to know is sort of you need to be close to the startup world and close to the world of where companies are scaling and being built. So I think there are a lot of good subscriptions out there which you can take up. And to name a few, there's the Ken, the Arc, and all of these different subscriptions which help you learn more about what are the trends currently. And once you start understanding the market trends and where where the money is flowing in, you start to build opinions of your own. So I think that, and secondly, I think speaking to a lot of people who are at senior level in VC, because I think they have already studied the industry for 3-4 years, and even speaking to people in startups as to what a founder's psychology is and how they are building. So I think these 3-4 things really help you a lot.
Right. Now, with the VC transition, when did you start thinking of an MBA and why?
Right. So I think I work in early stage climate tech VC. I developed a very keen interest in the climate tech sector. I thought there was a lot of impact which can be made in the sector today. And mainly going through this journey, I realized that while there's a lot of capital flowing in at the early stage, I realized there's a big funding gap in the growth stage in the ecosystem today, where I realized I could bring in more impact through my financial acumen and my sort of sector knowledge. And that's where I realized I want to pivot into growth stage investing instead of early stage in India itself.
Okay.
Now, to make that happen, I realized I need to develop my understanding of how complex capital structures work at a later stage, and how risk is assessed when you have to put in a lot of money into a company. And I realized that there is no better ecosystem to study this than the US, because the US has already seen quite a few companies on that path now. I wanted to go there, study those investment models, stay close to the ecosystem. And this is how I zeroed in on the fact that I wanted a US MBA. And the other finer aspects of this would be sort of to build a network with more like-minded peers, how they look at sort of companies there, and sort of gain global exposure with people. So yeah, I think that's why I wanted to do an international MBA.
And coming to the journey itself, so you did both GMAT and GRE. Share us the rationale. How did you go about doing that?
Right. So I think there's a sort of small journey there. So I think back in college, I was also applying for the deferred MBA. And I gave my GMAT then when I ended up with a score of 730. I wasn't, that was a classic GMAT, and I wasn't super happy. And so back then I decided not to apply for the deferred MBA course. And during BBA, I took a 2-year break to focus on work and CFA and all. Post that, started thinking of again giving the GMAT. In that scenario, one of my friends recommended me to give a GRE mock and see how I performed. So my base score when I gave this mock was already close to 330, and I realized I'd probably need to put in lesser work to get to a 330 plus than a, let's say, 750 plus in a classic GMAT. So I prepared for 3 months, started getting 330 plus in most mocks. On the actual exam day, I ended up with a 328 on my first take. Was again slightly disappointed. realized I lost a lot of marks in reading comprehension. And that's where I think I reached out to you as well, and to understand more. And I think you had guided me in terms of telling me that it might be sort of, while it's not a deal breaker or a deal maker score, it would be better to sort of, increase the score to increase my chances. And I worked harder on the reading comprehension section, on slowing down, understanding paragraphs better, reading them extremely well in the first go, even if it takes a little longer. And that finally helped me ended up getting a 337. And this was the score I sort of needed to push my profile. So yeah, the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you had a fantastic score. When and how did you decide to work or collaborate with us MBA at MBA Crystal Ball?
Right. So like I mentioned, when I had a 328, I sort of started realizing, okay, I might need to take the next step towards how I can propel my profile to going to that next level before I apply. And my plan was to sort of apply in 2026 for 2027 intake. So that's when I came across the MCB website and I went through some of your blogs. I loved the resources that you all had put out there. It gave me a lot of clarity in terms of what I might need to do. Of course, price was also a consideration, and I think MCB was sort of lower and competitive to what most consultants were quoting. And that's when I reached out to you, Manish, and you had sort of encouraged me to take the profile builder package, which once I took it, I think you gave me a lot of in-depth insights on things that I can work on all fronts of my profile, right? Before I actually go and apply in 1 year. And you also encouraged me to give the exam again. And post that, in 2 to 3 months, I sort of ended up increasing my score to 337. But by then, round 1 had passed. So I had again sort of reached out to you and tried to understand if it's a good strategy to go ahead with this. And then, I'll share more later.
Right. Now, while you had a lot of things going for you, as you went into the process, what were your concerns about this entire journey?
Right. So I think once I got a score of 337, I realized I could probably apply in round 2, 2026 itself, but I had some concerns still. The first one being I still had somewhere between 3 to 3.5 years of work experience, which sits slightly below the sweet spot of 4 years of work ex, which most candidates apply in usually. And out of which, again, another consideration was that I had only 1+ year in VC, which was my post-MBA goal. So, to make my story sound better, that won't be as much. Second concern was obviously round 2 is harder than round 1. So that's another one. But it would mean delaying my MBA by a year. So that's another thing I wanted to speak to you about. And then extracurriculars also had like a slight drop off after college, which happens, I think, to a lot of professionals out there, right? Once you start working, it's hard to keep up with everything you love doing. And then, so I wanted to sort of apply to 5 to 6 M7 schools. And which is when I think I reached out to you with the plan of applying to 2 schools in round 2 for 2026 intake. And in case that didn't work out, then sort of can stick to the plan and do the other 4 schools in round 1 for 2027 intake. This sort of obviously ran the risk of me probably not being able to reapply to the 2 schools that I did in round 2, since it would be too soon for reapplication. But I was okay with that risk. And I think you were immediately on board and said it's a very good strategy considering what you were seeing among applicants this year. So, and I decided to go ahead and apply to Wharton in Columbia.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting and I think well-balanced strategy that you did. Now, you applied to these 2 schools. Tell us about the interview process. Anything that was really interesting as you were going through the interviews.
Yeah. I ended up we crafted great applications for Wharton and Columbia. I'd also visited both the schools as well, and we could leverage those pretty well in our application, which is how I think I realized I ended up getting interview invites from both. I'd also taken an interview package from MCB for Columbia, and we worked on a huge list of questions, did a couple of mocks with you as well, which I think within a week's time prepared me super well for the Columbia interview. I think the Columbia interview went very well. It was very focused on my goals, how Columbia will help me achieve them, how I have clarity on how I will leverage the ecosystem to get where I want and what I will contribute to Columbia. And just another few more questions to get to know me better. So it was an interesting interview. I think very friendly interviewers. There was an alum who I had talked to. For Wharton, it was a completely different process. Wharton has a team-based discussion where you have to sort of, I think, be more proactive. There's a topic which they give on which you have to sort of prepare beforehand on a proposal, which you have to practice with a lot of people with. So you do that, connect with a lot of people, prepare for discussions on a given topic beforehand. And post that, there's a short 10-minute interview in which they ask you behavioral questions on how you deal with you've dealt with certain experiences in the past as well. So both interviews were super interesting, very different, and I think I got good exposure in both of them. Yeah.
So just kind of drilling down on this, the team-based discussion, how long is that for? What was the topic you got, if you could share that?
Sure. So it's a 25-minute team-based discussion. The topic there, I think in our year was more about Wharton has this leadership intensive. So in that leadership intensive, they were looking for a proposal to come from students on what the leadership intensive could be. This is basically a 1 to 2 day program where you take students sort of to a certain place near Philadelphia itself, where you put them through a rigorous intensive training program, which sort of helps you step out of your comfort zone, do things that you haven't done before, and come out with some leadership outcomes. And all of it done within a budget, right? So you have to plan for all of these different things, how you'll assess the outcomes, and you have to do each. So there are 5 to 6 people in the team-based discussion. Each person sort of talks about their proposal. You all take the next 20 minutes to converge on a certain proposal and then discuss the different aspects of how you would sort of what you would learn, what you'd assess there, how you would budget the whole thing. So that takes 20 minutes. And then in the last 5 minutes, as a group, you pitch the proposal that you selected.
Okay.
So that's the process. Yeah.
Now, final results. Where did you get in? Where are you headed?
Right. So, it was a long, anxious wait for the results. I think it took a month and a half. And I think the first result that came out for me, since I'd only applied to 2 schools, first was Columbia, second was Wharton. Columbia came out. I was, in fact, in the journey, I was like quietly confident of converting at least one. When CBS came out, it was a wait list for me, which was slightly disappointed, but I was ready to sort of work it out and sort of convert the waitlist to, an admit. And then a week later, thankfully, Wharton came back with an admit. And while Columbia is still working out if the waitlist would convert to an admit, I think I might be heading to Wharton itself now because, I think the course will just start. But yeah.
Absolutely. So as a closing remark, any tips, suggestions you have for future applicants?
Right. I think it's a super long process, the whole way of applying to an MBA and sort of the things that you have to do, building your profile, etc. I think it's a long process. Keep at it. One thing I think I would suggest is building a holistic sort of profile shouldn't be done for the sake of it. While you should start early, start doing things that you truly enjoy doing, right? Build both professionally and on the extracurricular front. Don't do it for the sake of a story. I think you'll be able to build a coherent story if you truly believe in what you are setting out to achieve. So, I think that would be my major suggestion.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing your journey, Atharva, and all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We hope you found this interview helpful. At MBA Crystal Ball, we've helped many applicants get into the elite business schools, often with scholarships. Reach out if you're looking for professional help with your applications. Good luck.